A tired young boy, Liam, stood outside a fancy restaurant, barefoot and holding a torn dog leash. Stepped into a fancy restaurant with a shy voice. All he asked was, "Can I give the leftovers to my dog, sir?" The room went silent. The millionaire turned to him, his eyes locked onto the boy, not because of the question, but because of the reason behind it. "Before I tell you what happened next, can I ask you something small? If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please tap that subscribe button." Most people watch and move on, but your one click could help this message reach someone who really needs it. Sometimes, the smallest voice can shake the biggest heart. And in this case, one simple act of love for a pet became the spark that lit up a miracle. So stick around, because this story is going to hit you right in the heart. The city Liam lived in wasn't made for kids like him. It had tall buildings, wide roads, and restaurants where people laughed over meals that cost more than Liam had seen in weeks. But for boys like Liam, thin, quiet, with shoes that flopped a little when he walked, it was like being invisible, or worse, a stain people pretended not to see. Most days, Liam didn't mind being invisible, because if people really saw him, they'd see the truth, that he hadn't had a full meal in 3 days, that he didn't know when his aunt would be home, that the only living being he trusted in the whole world was a dog. Rusty. Rusty wasn't the kind of dog you see in commercials. He wasn't groomed or shiny. He had one ear that bent the wrong way and fur that was rough in places, soft in others, and a limp, a small one, but it was permanent. His left back leg had been injured when he threw himself between Liam and a snarling stray one night in a dark alley behind an old supermarket. Rusty didn't hesitate, and that's how Liam knew. Rusty didn't see him as a poor kid, or a burden, or a problem. To Rusty, Liam was everything. Liam hadn't always lived like this. There was a time, not so long ago, when things were warm and safe, when his mother would hum songs while making soup, when his father would toss him into the air and catch him as he giggled, heart racing with joy. But life has a cruel way of shifting. His mom got sick, the kind of sick that medicine couldn't fix. She fought it bravely, but one morning, Liam woke up and her bed was empty. The silence that filled the house after that was heavy. His dad, once strong and full of laughter, began to shrink into himself. At first, it was just sadness. Then came the bottles, then the absences, and finally he was gone too. That's when his aunt stepped in, a woman with kind eyes but tired shoulders. She worked hard, tried to keep Liam in school, tried to make sure there was something to eat, but bills stacked up, and she began disappearing too, little by little. Some nights she was gone, others she came back smelling like smoke and hopelessness. It was during this time, when Liam was just 8, that he found Rusty, or maybe Rusty found him. Liam was walking through an alley behind the local grocery store, trying to find a fallen apple or a half-eaten sandwich. Instead, he found a box. Inside was a tiny dog, shivering, wet, with eyes so big they seemed to swallow his face. Liam didn't think. He just picked him up, tucked him into his jacket, and said, "It's okay now. You got me." From that moment on, they were inseparable. They'd sleep curled up together under a blanket that was too small. They'd share every bite of food Liam could find. When it was too hot, Liam would pour water from broken fountains into his cupped hands for Rusty to drink. When it was too cold, Rusty would curl against Liam's chest like a heater made of love and fur. But lately, it had gotten harder. The food wasn't coming. The leftovers in dumpsters were being locked away. Stores put up signs warning against loitering, and Liam could see it in Rusty's eyes. The hunger, the weakness, the way he tried to wag his tail and pretend he was fine, but couldn't quite manage. On one particular morning, Liam woke up to Rusty licking his face. It wasn't playful. It was desperate. Liam sat up slowly. His stomach growled. He'd had nothing but a dry crust of bread in nearly 24 hours. Rusty hadn't eaten either. His movements were sluggish, his eyes glassy. That's when Liam made up his mind. He had to try something different. Begging? No, that wasn't him. He wouldn't stand on a corner with a sign. He wouldn't sit with a cup asking for coins, but asking for something that was going to be thrown away anyway. Maybe that wasn't begging. Maybe that was survival. He thought about the restaurant district. He'd passed through it once before, when following a scent that led nowhere. The buildings were fancy, with gold letters on the signs and candles on the tables. The people who walked and wore shiny shoes and carried bags that probably cost more than Liam's entire life. Still, they had food. So much food. And Liam had a plan. He waited until late afternoon. He knew that's when most people finished lunch. The kitchens would still be warm, but the lunch rush would be over. Less people, less attention. Rusty followed slowly behind him, tail dragging, ribs beginning to show. As they reached the main street, Liam paused. The restaurants all looked the same, clean, perfect, with polished glass and white tablecloths. One stood out, though, Marcelino's. The name didn't mean much to Liam, but the smell, oh, the smell. Warm butter, roasted garlic, steak, real steak. His mouth watered. He led Rusty to a small alley beside the building and told him to wait. "I'll be back, boy. Just stay right here. You're gonna eat today, I promise." Inside, Marcelino's was quiet but full. Couples talking over wine, a family laughing over a plate of pasta, a businessman speaking softly into a headset, nodding at a laptop. But one table caught Liam's attention immediately. It was near the window. The man sitting there looked like he didn't belong. Not because he wasn't dressed well. He was in a suit so perfect it looked like it was made just for him. But because he looked empty. There were 5 plates in front of him, all untouched. Liam watched as the man picked up a fork, then put it down again, sighed, checked his watch, looked out the window. Not once did he eat. Something told Liam this man might listen. And so, heart pounding like a drum, Liam stepped through the glass doors. Immediately, the warmth hit him, the smell, the stares. Waiters glanced toward him, then quickly away. A hostess took a step forward, but before she could say anything, the man in the gray suit lifted a hand. "Let him come." Everyone froze. The man's voice wasn't loud, but it was the kind of voice people listen to. Liam approached slowly. When he reached the table, he looked up, and their eyes met. For the first time in a long time, someone saw Liam, not as a problem, not as a nuisance, but as a person. And so he asked, softly, respectfully, from the very bottom of his heart, "Can I give the leftovers to my dog, sir?" The world paused. The clink of forks, the murmurs of conversation, faded. It was like time itself held its breath. The man stared at Liam for a long, long moment. Then, something in his expression shifted. It wasn't pity. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. The man across the table didn't speak right away. His eyes flicked over Liam, taking in the torn collar, the scuffed shoes, the small hands curled tightly around each other. He glanced at the door, where Liam had entered, then toward the alley through the large window, as if expecting to see someone waiting. "Your dog," he said finally, voice low. "What's his name?" "Rusty," Liam answered softly. The man nodded slowly. "And you came in here, not to ask for yourself, not to beg, but to take food for your dog." Liam gave a small shrug, barely lifting his shoulders. "He hasn't eaten since yesterday. I had a bit of bread. But Rusty, he's getting weak." The words didn't come easy. This wasn't a boy who asked for things. He'd learned early that asking usually got you ignored, or worse, embarrassed. But for Rusty, he'd do anything, even this. The man pushed back his chair slowly and stood. Everyone nearby turned to watch. "Wait here." Liam froze, unsure what that meant. Was he calling the manager? The police? But instead, the man walked to the window. He pressed a hand to the glass and stared into the alley beside the building. Then he turned and looked back at Liam. "I want to meet him," he said. Liam blinked. "Rusty?" "Yes, bring him in." Now this was unexpected. Liam rushed outside, practically sliding on the sidewalk. Rusty perked up immediately, tail wagging with surprise and delight. "Come on, boy," Liam whispered. "He wants to see you." Together, they stepped through the glass doors again. This time, everyone stared openly. Whispers followed them. A few people sneered. A waiter mouthed something to a colleague, something like, "What is that dog doing here?" But the man held up his hand again. "He's with me." Rusty stood still beside the table, his big brown eyes locking with the man's. He didn't bark, didn't whimper. He just looked, and the man knelt. He bent slowly, lowering himself in his fine suit right onto the restaurant floor. And for a few seconds, he and Rusty simply stared at one another. It was almost like they understood each other. Then, gently, the man reached out and scratched behind Rusty's ear. "Good boy," he said softly. Rusty leaned into the touch, tail swaying. The man stood up again. "What's your name?" he asked, turning to Liam. "Liam." "Well, Liam," he said, "you and Rusty look like you've been through a lot." Liam didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. The man took his seat again and gestured to the waiter. "Bring me 2 steaks, fresh, medium rare, one for the boy, one for the dog, and water, clean bowls, not the cheap ones." The waiter hesitated. "Sir, I said do it." And just like that, Liam and Rusty sat together in a 5-star restaurant, being served as if they were honored guests. While they waited for the food, the man studied Liam carefully. "How old are you?" 10. "And you take care of the dog all by yourself?" Liam nodded. "No one else helps?" "No." The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You remind me of someone." Liam tilted his head. "My son. He'd have been 10 this year. The words sat heavy between them. The man's name, Liam would learn later, was Charles Grant, owner of luxury hotels, investor in tech companies, former Wall Street giant. He had more money than he knew what to do with, but no family. Not anymore. My wife passed away during childbirth, he said. My boy was all I had. He was kind, loved dogs, especially big clumsy ones with crooked tails. Like your Rusty. A small smile tugged at his lips. He always used to sneak food under the table for our Labrador. Max said Max needed dessert too. Then the smile faded. He died in a car accident 5 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light. He didn't stand a chance. Charles looked down, rubbing his thumb over a ring on his finger. After that, I stopped going out, stopped talking. I started eating alone, like today. Liam didn't know what to say, but Rusty did. He rested his head on Charles's lap. The food arrived. Fresh, hot, tender. Liam couldn't believe it. Rusty's eyes lit up. They both ate like it was the first real meal they had in years. And maybe it was. Charles didn't eat. He just watched them with quiet amazement, like he was witnessing something rare, something sacred. Liam, he said finally, what would you do if someone gave you a better life? Liam blinked. What do you mean? I mean, what if I helped you? Got you a warm place to live, real meals, school, a proper bed for Rusty. Liam stared at him. Why? He asked. Charles leaned back. Because someone should have helped me once. And because you came in here today, not for yourself, but for your dog. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. For Liam, life had always been about surviving the day. He never imagined what it meant to live beyond that. But Charles did more than imagine. He took action. That night, he walked Liam home, if you could call it that. A crumbling apartment building with no working lights in the hallway. Rusty hesitated at the stairs, his bad leg trembling. Charles saw it all. He didn't say anything, but his face said enough. By the next morning, Liam and Rusty had a hotel room. Not one of Charles's luxury suites, but a warm, clean place with a big bed, hot shower, and breakfast that didn't come out of a trash bag. The following week, Charles met with child services. And then something even more shocking happened. He filed to become Liam's legal guardian. It wasn't quick. It wasn't easy. There were meetings, papers, home visits. But Charles didn't stop, because something had shifted in him that day in the restaurant. Something he thought was dead came back to life. And all because of a boy who loved a dog enough to ask for leftovers. By the time spring arrived, Liam had a new home, a real one, with a backyard Rusty could run in, with a porch swing, and a soft bed and pancakes on Sunday mornings. He started school again. Rusty got physical therapy for his leg. Charles began smiling more, laughing, living. They weren't just filling holes in each other's lives. They were becoming a family. The problem/challenge was never just about hunger. It was about love. The kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return. The kind that fights for someone else when the world forgets you. The kind that walks into a restaurant and says, "Can I give the leftovers to my dog, sir?" And in doing so, changes everything. In the days that followed, the world began to feel unfamiliar in the best possible way. For Liam, every morning used to begin with worry. Would there be food? Would Rusty be okay? Would today be worse than yesterday? But now, things were different. He was still cautious. He still held on tight to Rusty's leash whenever they walked. He still watched people carefully, just in case kindness turned out to be temporary. Because when you've lived through loss, joy can feel like a trick. But Charles, he didn't disappear. He didn't treat Liam like a project. He treated him like a person, a real person. At first, Liam stayed quiet during their dinners. He wasn't sure how to act with someone like Charles, someone who spoke with waiters by name, who had 2 phones and a driver, who wore white gloves. But Charles never made Liam feel small. He asked questions, listened to the answers, and the more Liam talked, the more Charles smiled. Sometimes it was a sad smile, like hearing Liam's story brought back echoes of his own son. But sometimes it was genuine, the kind of smile that crept up unexpectedly. One evening, Liam told him a story about how Rusty once chased a squirrel into a bush so thick it took 20 minutes to get him out. Charles laughed, not a polite chuckle, a full, chest-deep laugh that startled even himself. He stopped, covered his mouth, and whispered, "I haven't laughed like that in years." But it wasn't just laughter returning, it was purpose. Charles started checking on Liam's schoolwork, meeting with his teachers, attending school meetings for the first time in his life. He bought Rusty a custom-made harness that supported his weak leg. He even began walking with them in the evenings, through quiet parks, where he used to go alone just to feel something. And that's the thing, he did feel something now. He didn't say it aloud, not yet, but every time Liam grabbed his hand crossing the street, or every time Rusty rested his head on Charles's foot during breakfast, something inside him softened. One day, Liam found Charles in his study. He was holding a photo, an old one, a boy with curly brown hair, holding a Labrador, both of them laughing. "Is that your son?" Liam asked quietly. Charles nodded. His name was Jacob. Liam stepped closer. "He looks happy." "He was." Charles looked at Liam. "You remind me of him, not because you look like him, but because you care like he did." Liam said nothing, but something shifted in that silence. Charles reached over and handed him the photo. "Keep it." "I can't." "You can, because you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." As weeks turned into months, word started to spread. People in the restaurant district began whispering about the millionaire and the street kid. Some thought it was a publicity stunt. Others said Charles was losing his mind. But those who saw them together, who saw how Liam laughed now, how Rusty ran in the grass again, how Charles held both their leashes with a strange, almost fragile pride, those people understood. This wasn't a stunt. It was a rescue, not of a boy, but of a man. Still, not everything came easy. There were visits from social workers, questions, papers to sign, background checks. Liam's aunt, when finally contacted, was shocked. She cried over the phone, apologized over and over, said she didn't mean to leave him so alone. Charles didn't speak badly about her. He simply said, "Sometimes, life knocks the strength out of people, and sometimes it gives it back, through someone else." She agreed to let Charles take custody, because for the first time, Liam had a real shot, a real life. And Rusty? Oh, Rusty changed too, with proper food, regular checkups, and real rest. His limp improved. The vet said it wouldn't vanish completely, but with physical therapy, Rusty could run again, and he did. One morning, Charles and Liam stood side by side in a field outside the city. Rusty stood a few feet ahead, tail twitching, ears perked. Liam raised an arm. "Go, Rusty." The dog took off, not as fast as before, not without effort, but he ran, with joy. Charles wiped a tear from his eye. "I haven't seen a more beautiful thing in my entire life." But something else began happening too. Charles, who had once eaten alone every night, began changing how he lived. He stopped attending certain meetings. He sold one of his penthouses. He invested not in luxury condos, but in youth shelters. He even started a foundation named Rusty's Hope. Its mission, to support children with pets living in poverty, to help keep kids and their animals together, even through hard times. He said, no child should have to give up the only one who never gave up on them. And slowly, the past began to heal. Liam asked about Jacob more often. They'd go through photo albums together. Charles would tell stories, funny, sad, beautiful ones, about Jacob's love for comic books, his obsession with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, his dream of becoming a veterinarian. It hurt, but in a good way, because now, those memories had a place to live again, not in silence, but in stories, shared. One evening, as the sky turned gold, Charles placed a hand on Liam's shoulder and said, I think Jacob would have liked you. Liam smiled. I think I would have liked him too. It was a Friday afternoon when the storm rolled in, not the kind with thunder and lightning, but one of uncertainty, of unexpected confrontation, the kind that tests what a bond is really made of. Charles had been invited to a formal charity gala. It wasn't his thing anymore, not since his life had changed. He hated the suits, the fake smiles, the polished lies. But the event was for a good cause, ironically, an animal rescue organization, and the host had personally asked him to come. So he agreed. He brought Liam and Rusty with him. The venue was glittering with chandeliers and white tablecloths, tall flutes of champagne, and delicate hors d'oeuvres balanced on trays. The moment they walked in, the room paused. People turned, eyebrows lifted. A few whispered, Is that the boy? Is that the dog? That's him. Liam stiffened. Rusty stayed close to his leg, alert. Charles leaned down and whispered, Ignore them. You're with me. As the night wore on, the tension only grew. At one point, a woman approached them, dressed in a sparkling silver gown, diamond earrings swaying. She smiled too wide. And who do we have here? She asked, bending slightly toward Liam, like he was part of an exhibit. This is Liam, Charles said evenly. And his dog, Rusty. She looked at Rusty and wrinkled her nose. A bit scruffy for an event like this, don't you think? Charles said nothing for a moment. Then, he's more dignified than most of the people in this room. The woman blinked, clearly not expecting that. Charles didn't care. He guided Liam and Rusty toward the back of the hall, where it was quieter. But something was building inside Liam. Not fear, not quite anger, but doubt. He looked up at Charles. Do I belong here? Charles froze. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because that question, those exact words, had once been asked by someone else, Jacob, years ago, in a different setting, a different tone. Do I belong here? Charles turned to Liam, knelt to his level, and held his gaze. Liam, he said, voice thick, you belong everywhere I go. You and Rusty, always. Liam nodded slowly, but in his eyes, Charles saw it, the old scar, the feeling of never being enough. And so Charles did something completely unexpected. He stepped back onto the stage, where the speeches were being given, walked straight up to the microphone. No one had called him up. The room fell silent as he adjusted the mic. He looked out over the glittering crowd, then down at Liam and Rusty, and he spoke. I wasn't planning to talk tonight, he said, but I think maybe I should. He paused. His hand gripped the edge of the podium. 5 years ago, I lost my wife, then my son, and for a long time, I thought the world had nothing left for me. A few in the audience murmured, some bowed their heads. But one day, not long ago, a boy walked into my restaurant, not for himself, not to beg, but to ask if he could give the leftovers from my table to his dog. The room was utterly still now. That boy didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for help. He just wanted to feed the only friend he had left in the world. He looked over at Liam, who stood frozen, eyes wide, heart pounding, and in that moment, something in me cracked open, something I thought I'd buried. Charles's voice grew steadier. I invited them in, him and his dog, and over the weeks that followed, they reminded me of what it means to be human, of what it means to love without conditions. He took a deep breath. So, if you're wondering why I brought them here tonight, it's because they saved my life, more than I ever saved theirs. And if you can't see the beauty in that, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here. A hush settled over the room, but it wasn't judgment anymore. It was reverence. When Charles stepped down, Liam didn't run to him. He walked. Rusty trotted at his side, tail up, ears alert. Liam wrapped his arms around Charles's waist, burying his face in his coat, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel small. He felt seen. People clapped. A few stood. But Charles didn't hear it. All he felt was the small boy holding onto him like a lifeline. And he knew, deep down, that this moment, this was the true turning point. The next morning, something even bigger happened. A lawyer came to the house. Papers were ready. Meetings had happened behind the scenes for weeks. Social services had done their final review. And with one signature, it became official. Liam was now Charles's son. Legally, fully, completely. Rusty barked as they hugged. The yard behind the house was full of sunlight. Birds chirped. The wind carried the smell of grass and breakfast sausage. Liam knelt beside Rusty, petting his head gently. We made it, boy, he whispered. We finally made it. Charles stood above them, blinking fast. You didn't just change my fate, he said quietly. You saved it. This was the moment everything had led to. A boy who loved his dog. A man who thought he had nothing left. And the simple question that connected them. Can I give the leftovers to my dog, sir? That question didn't just change a day. It changed 3 lives. Forever. Some stories don't start with heroes. They don't begin with grand adventures or magical discoveries. Sometimes they start with hunger, with cold, with a boy holding onto a dog because that's the only heartbeat that hasn't left him. Liam never wanted anything more than to make sure Rusty was fed. He didn't want handouts. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted his best friend to be okay. And that single act of love, asking for scraps to feed someone else, became the spark that lit an entire future on fire. Because what Charles saw that day wasn't just a hungry child. He saw hope. He saw loyalty, innocence, strength. He saw someone who had every reason to give up, yet hadn't. Someone who was willing to risk being embarrassed, rejected, even humiliated, not for himself, but for someone he loved. And maybe, just maybe, Charles saw the boy he once had, the son he lost, the version of himself he forgot. That day, a boy walked into a restaurant with nothing but courage and a question, and he walked out with something priceless. A future, a family, a father. For months after the adoption was finalized, life continued in simple, beautiful ways. Charles learned how to cook breakfast, real breakfast, not eggs from a hotel buffet, but pancakes the way Liam liked them, slightly undercooked in the middle, with way too much syrup. They went to the park every Sunday. Rusty wore a blue collar now, with a small silver tag that read, "If found, I belong to Liam and Charles." Even that was a statement. Not owner, not property, but belong. Because that's what they were now. They belonged to each other. Charles began mentoring other kids at shelters, often bringing Liam along to speak with kids who felt forgotten by the world. Liam didn't say much. He didn't need to. Just his story, just the fact that he was there, said enough. One night, months later, Liam asked something he had never dared ask before. Do you think Rusty knows he saved us? Charles looked down at the dog, peacefully snoring between them on the couch. I think he knew before we did, Charles said softly. And maybe he did, because that's the thing about dogs. They don't care where you come from. They don't care about your past, your money, your mess. They just love, completely, unconditionally, silently. And in that silence, they teach us how to be better. The story didn't end when Liam got adopted. It didn't end when Charles opened the foundation. It didn't even end when Rusty's limp healed and he could run freely again. Because this story keeps echoing. Every time someone chooses love over judgment. Every time a kid dares to hope, even in darkness. Every time a heartbroken person chooses to open the door just once more, the story lives on. So maybe the biggest miracles don't come with flashing lights or breaking news. Maybe they come quietly, in the form of a small voice asking a simple question inside a big, cold restaurant. Can I give the leftovers to my dog, sir? That question didn't just feed Rusty. It fed a heart that thought it had nothing left to give. It reminded the world that sometimes the ones with the least to offer are the ones who give the most. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and watch the next one. Trust me, it's even more powerful.